What's this? What's this? A Nightmare Before Christmas sequel. Hello everybody, and welcome to another Cartoon Galaxy rant, where I like to, rant about cartoons and junk. Now, this past week or so, there was a big announcement. That being that there is going to be a sequel for the movie Beetlejuice. Yes, Beetlejuice. And no, I am not going to say his name a third time. That being said, I thought today I'd talk about another popular Tim Burton film, which is one of the best freaking movies of all time. That being The Nightmare Before Christmas. And not only do I want to talk about this film, but I want to talk about whether it too should get a sequel. Now, sequels for this film have been discussed before. In fact, it had come up in internet discussion late last year, if I'm not mistaken. So why not talk about it again? Keep in mind, this video is based solely on my opinions. You are more than welcome to agree or disagree with me on this topic, and of course, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Moreover, if you enjoyed this video, don't be afraid to like and subscribe for more content. Not only do I like to talk about cartoons, but I also make animations based off the cartoons we all love and grew up with, so you can find all that on my channel. Wink wink, check out more of my shit. So yeah, let's get into it. Now, before I dive into my thoughts about A Nightmare Before Christmas sequel, I'd like to share a little bit about the popularity of this film, because when you look at the history of its release compared to now, in which everyone wants more content centered around this film, you'd be pretty surprised to find that The Nightmare Before Christmas didn't get as much love when it came out in the theaters. And yes, I saw this movie when it came out in the theaters, back in 1993, which is a very long time ago. Like, I was literally a little baby at the time when I saw this movie with my family, and I loved it. I loved it so much that I got the VHS for Christmas. And for those viewers of mine who weren't around during the time of VHSs, let's just say they were bulky, low-grade versions of DVDs. Yes, they bring some nice memories, but VHSs weren't devices to last, especially that Nightmare Before Christmas VHS that I probably watched like 1,000 times, so much so that my family members were probably hearing the music from the film repeat over and over again in their dreams. Or nightmares. Even to this day, if anyone asks me what my favorite movie is, it is still The Nightmare Before Christmas. You think I'm kidding? Oh no, I'm not. I'm not kidding at all. This movie is my life and an inspiration to all of what I do. So, yeah. But back in the day, in the early 90s, when it came out, it felt almost like I was one of the few who loved this movie because it wasn't very popular. And one of the key signs was merchandise. Now, you might notice in my other videos that I talk about merchandise a lot, and no, it's not just to show off my collection of crap. Or is it? Nah, it's not. But I usually bring it up because merchandise is a pure sign of the popularity of whatever media is out there at the time. In short, if there is a lot of merch on a show or movie, you better believe it's because it is popular. I mean, think about it. Would companies want to put money into making merchandise for anything that few people care about? Hell no. And unfortunately, that was the case with The Nightmare Before Christmas. There was merchandise, don't get me wrong. There was. I mean, I suppose being a Disney film, there were hopes The Nightmare Before Christmas would gain an audience. But yeah, the selling of Nightmare Before Christmas merch was short-lived because most folks weren't buying. The few people who adored the film, though, well, you better believe they collected them while they were out, making them valuable as hell when you couldn't find them in stores anymore. And why couldn't you find them in stores? Because the rest went up on sale and stores got rid of them. After that, you wouldn't find one freaking Nightmare Before Christmas item anywhere. And I mean anywhere. My family and I had to literally travel to a little shop in, I believe it was New Hope, Pennsylvania, where expensive collector items of Nightmare Before Christmas merchandise were sold. That's how rare they were. I was lucky enough to get only one Nightmare Before Christmas toy. That's right, just one. And I was a little late in the game when merchandise was shortly available. And while being a kid, I didn't have the money to go on a Nightmare Before Christmas shopping spree. So yeah, I got one toy, and that was the bendable Jack in his Santa outfit, which I still have to this very day. And yes, I know the bendable toys came back, but it's the original baby and not in great shape, so it's probably not valuable or anything because his head tends to pop out from time to time. Did I mention I was also a very klutzy kid? Actually, that hasn't really changed much, so yeah. Now, you guys might be asking, Mars, the movie is really popular now, so...
What are you talking about?
Well, yes, it finally became popular, I'd say, during my teenage years. So I'm going to guess early 2000s. I could be off. I'm just going based on memory from experience. And what brought this film back into the spotlight, you ask? Well, I'm going to say the emos and goths. Goths with their sort of punky vibe and dark attire, and emos who also dress pretty dark but were always kind of crying in the corner and writing poetry. No offense to emos, because I was a little inner emo myself in my youth. There's the truth. The truth's out there. The truth about little emo Mars. Though, I'm out of that phase. Now I'm ranting eccentric adult Mars. What is wrong with me? But yeah, merch started showing up in Hot Topic and then pretty much everywhere. You can't go any place now without seeing Nightmare merch and meeting folks who know the film and love it. They even re-released the film in 3D in 2009, so you better believe I went to see it and relive the first day I saw it in theaters. Yep. If not for emos and goths, I truly believe this movie would just be a cult classic with very few people acknowledging its existence. So creds to the emos and goths. If not for them, this masterpiece of a film would have never gotten a second chance at life. Kudos to you, my friends. You've done good. You've done good. Now, after giving a little history about The Nightmare Before Christmas's initial and final reactions with audiences, let's dive into whether it is deserving of a sequel. Does The Nightmare Before Christmas deserve a sequel? Yes. Yes, it does. Okay, there you go. Video's over. That's my answer. Bye-bye, everybody. Just kidding. Actually, it's more complicated than that. Sure, the film deserves a sequel, but should a sequel exist? Would that be a good move, especially after not just one, but 3 decades of existence? Yes, this film is 30 years old. Seriously, why isn't there like a parade or something? Come on, Disney, make some magic happen. Jeez. But see, this is where 30 years could be an issue when suddenly deciding to make a sequel. I know that sounds weird to say, but just hang in there and let me explain. If you guys are familiar with a lot of TV shows and films that have either been rebooted or received sequels after long year gaps, usually the quality of these sequels and reboots are not too good. Not that they are bad, but they aren't great either. Think about it. When you have such a long period of time between the release of an original film or show to the time a sequel is made, you may no longer have the same writers because most of the originals may have moved on. You also may not have the same voice actors. Whoever is still original and jumps into this new project has to now recapture an experience from so long ago that it may not be possible to recapture it. Just put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Years before Nightmare released in 1993, these folks were making the Nightmare Before Christmas film. They were connecting to the characters, the world, the things that were happening, and how this affected the characters. Hell, these people were the characters at this point. They were the scene and the world, and after years of making this film became their life. Believe it or not, there were people on this film that were on the project so long, they were making their own families behind the scenes. As the film grew, they were growing around it, with it. Now, tell those folks after 30 years to reconnect the same way they did to The Nightmare Before Christmas as they did before 1993. Sure, they could probably come back to that world and its characters, but the connection isn't the same. Think of it like if you had an old friend who you were close to and then didn't stay in touch with for many years. Sometimes it's a struggle to get back in the flow of things because so much time has passed. Things are different, and you guys are different. It's almost the same with creators and their work. On top of that, add the pressure that might be placed on them to make a product equivalent, if not greater, than the original. That's a tough thing to do. Now I'd like to take this moment to focus on Tim Burton, the producer of Nightmare, and the one who wrote the story that the film is based off of, Danny Elfman, the music behind the film, and Henry Selick, the director of the film. These guys are literally the holy trinity of this movie. Tim is the one who molded the shape of this film, Henry gave it life, and Danny gave it soul. If you take one out, the trinity falls apart, and so does the film. How does this relate to this video's topic? Well, it kind of goes into what I said earlier about time. Back in the 90s, Tim directed and created so many amazing films. Beetlejuice, like I mentioned earlier, Edward Scissorhands, Batman, Frankenweenie. No, not that Frankenweenie. Yeah, that Frankenweenie. But through the years, his films, although not popular, haven't been his best. Now I know a lot of you will say, well, what about Wednesday? That's pretty good. Who can't resist that Wednesday dance, am I right? Well, I've watched one episode so far, and yeah, it is pretty good, but doesn't hold a candle to any of Tim's older work. Tim's old work is remembered to this day. The question is whether Wednesday will be remembered in years to come as well, and that we will have to see in time. Now, Danny Elfman suffers the same issues. His music made movies. For example, look at the Batman theme song from the 90s Batman film featuring Michael Keaton. The moment you heard that song, you knew Batman was a-comin'. It was even in the 90s Batman animated series. Let's just say that song was Batman at the time. And the music for Nightmare, purely magical. I can't get tired of Sally's song and Jack's lament. I hear those songs and know what the characters are feeling, and I'm feeling it with them. But now his music just sounds the same. No matter what film it's in, you could tell it's his work most times, but let's just say if you heard the songs without the movie, you probably wouldn't be able to identify what movie it belongs to. There's nothing unique between the music he composes anymore. But again, that's just my take on it. Now, I've talked about creative fatigue in my earlier video of Rick and Morty. If you haven't checked that out, feel free to click on the link above. But what's going on with Danny and Tim could be the result of that. Maybe. It's just an assumption. As for Henry Selick, he's actually the complete opposite. Since Nightmare, his work as a director for animated films has significantly improved. If you watch Nightmare, which was absolutely well animated, it was phenomenal how him and his crew got the flow of the movement just right, and the expressions created on each character's face is just fantastic. But then if you watch Coraline, it's like you took that and topped it. Now, I don't know if this is because there are new technologies and strategies for stop motion than there were back then, but either way, it works, and it's great. So, yeah, if Nightmare came back as a sequel and Henry was directing, well, I already know that's going to work wonderfully. Trouble is, according to many of the articles and things I've stumbled upon online, that of which have talked about the possibility of a Nightmare sequel, one thing irked me. A lot of folks theorize that they will not use stop motion for the sequel and will substitute it with, as far as I'm concerned, the cheaper CGI animation style. And you know what? I could see Disney doing that. Cheaping out just to make a quick buck on a popular franchise? Yeah, definitely Disney territory. However, if you take out stop motion, if you remove Henry Selick, the Holy Trinity is shattered. And if that happens, believe me, the movie will suffer immensely. Let's just say it'll look similar to the sort of Nightmare sequel that came out as a video game by Capcom. I don't know if you guys remember Oogie's Revenge. And sure, it doesn't look terrible, but come on. Compare this to this and tell me which one you think looks better. This leads me to my last thing, what the sequel will be about. In the past, I heard that Tim considered a Nightmare sequel that would have been focused around St. Patrick's Day, and well, not sure how that would have worked, but it never happened anyway. Perhaps because the movie didn't gain popularity upon original release. Who knows? And like I said, there were sequel and prequel type media like Oogie's Revenge and another video game on the Game Boy Advance called The Pumpkin King, explaining the story behind Jack and Oogie's feud. In fact, I'm not sure if they released it yet or they're going to be releasing a comic that will dive more into the story in, it's supposed to be this month, I believe. And I have to say, I'm excited to give it a read. But there has been talk that if a theatrical sequel were to be released, it would be centered around the book Long Live the Pumpkin Queen by Shay Earnshaw, which came out in August of 2022. This story focuses a lot on Sally and how she is coping with being the Pumpkin Queen. We also get a revelation in terms of her backstory, that of which I won't get into because, I mean, if you want to get into spoilers, yeah, it has one hell of a spoiler. So if you want to find out, I'd highly recommend giving this book a read. It was actually really good. I liked it. And of all things, I think it is being held as canon. Unlike most books that usually just have one author and that's it, this book had a whole team behind it, which you can see in the thank you page at the end of, well, the book itself. Shay Earnshaw did work on this project alone, gaining insight from other individuals hired to help with the book's creation. Shay also received Tim Burton's blessing to make the book. So if that doesn't give it some sort of canon feeling, I don't know what else will. Now, fans could have mixed reactions with Sally's revealed backstory. Depends on the person. I thought it was okay. It is a bit to get used to, though, considering all these years of knowing Sally as we did in the original movie, but it's an interesting twist. Either way, should this book be the sequel? That is the question. And although some folks might think that'd be cool, I don't think it would make for a good sequel, and this is why. The book focuses solely on Sally, with Jack being present in the beginning of the story, but he's missing in pretty much the rest, if not most, of the tale. Now, as much as I love Sally, I also love Jack, and not having him present in the majority of the story would just be, well, disappointing. Even if you look at the original movie, although the focus of the story was centered on Jack, Sally played a vital role throughout the film, and we saw her a lot. If anything, beside Jack, she was also a main character as far as I'm concerned. She had moments escaping from Finkelstein to find Jack, was the voice of reason when Jack was about to make a big mistake, ruining Christmas, and she even risked her own life in an attempt to save Sandy Claus from Oogie Boogie. Sally also got her own song called, no kidding, Sally's Song, and her and Jack both had big roles in the movie. So excluding one from the sequel just would be a missed opportunity, especially since the sequel would open up a new chapter in Jack and Sally's life, being husband and wife. Focusing on this could be really interesting, especially as Jack and Sally have very different personalities. You can even say they are opposites of each other, But it's these opposite personalities that make them so perfect for each other as they balance each other out and complement each other. If the sequel is based off the book, yeah, you have a story about Sally, but the chance of finally seeing how Jack and Sally are together at last, well, let's just say we waited so long for that, but won't get to see it, and that would kinda suck. So, should Nightmare get a sequel? Sure. It is a great movie and definitely deserves one, but is it a good idea? Not really. Maybe if it is done right, with the right kind of story, the right kind of writers, including the originals, the Holy Trinity being together, that being Burton, Elfman, and Selleck, and that they still use stop motion animation, then I think it could be a good sequel. But considering it's been so long and Disney does have a tendency to cheap out on sequels, need I remind you of some more recent ones? It doesn't seem like a sequel would be the best idea. Even if it managed to be somewhat enjoyable, I don't think it could surpass what the original really was. A classic, simply meant to be. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and feel free to subscribe. If you have thoughts about whether Nightmare should get a sequel, please share below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and peace out.